Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine. I drop in facts and observations, and all the time try to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about each episode might be.
Hi Toby, I'm Iain Key, and I've chosen for you The Invisible Enemy. Happy Times and Places.
Hello everyone, or should I say, contact has been made. It is me, Toby Haydock, contacting you, the great unwashed. What else do I call you? I don't know. I'm out there in the ether, waiting to hear signals from outer space, or wherever it is you gather the noises that you pour into your ears from. But anyway, I'm communicating across the ether, hopefully not as a malignant infection that takes over your mind and gives you silver eyebrows and an alien voice. Anyway, no alien voices. Well, I don't know. Amongst our correspondence about episode 1 of The Invisible Enemy, which I commentated upon some time ago, and people have had time to send their thoughts. So they include Stephen Witowski, who is a key player in the Festival of Fantastic Film that takes place in Manchester. Every year I've been a guest as a punter and as a talker, and it's always delightful. And I'm really grateful to be part of that community as a visitor. They do great work. So Stephen says, I didn't get to meet Michael Sheard at the Fab Cafe event. Good, Stephen, because I've got a bit drunk. However, my friend Amanda sat with him at that event, I think. She told me he was an old-fashioned gentleman who stood up when she left the table. Did she say there was an annoying drunk man there who'd just been dumped and was a bit sad? That was me. Amanda was most impressed. Well, maybe she's so impressed with dear old Michael Sheard that she's cast me from her memory. I do hope so. That's an episode from my canon I would happily see consigned to the furnace for good. Alas, Amanda died in 2008. I should have got to the end of that before being so crass, Stephen. Well, I'm glad Amanda had happy memories of Michael Sheard, and they're both gone now. But aren't we lucky to have such people in our orbit for the time that we have them? Which, means that we shouldn't regret things, although I still regret the fact that I got pissed that day. Anyway, I know she corresponded with, back to Amanda, I know she corresponded with Anthony Ainley for a few years, but I've no idea where the letters are now, as I lost touch with her family. It's odd that what memories these episodes bring up. It was good to remember my friend who died much too young. Well, I mean, what we are sort of some of our memories, and I'm one of my feelings about getting older is that, and when I look at, we've all encountered old people who've been cross and grumpy, and you think, is it because you just sort of get creaky and you're impatient and your mind's fraying? No, I think it's because we are an accumulation, if we're not careful, an accumulation of regrets and embarrassments. And I have embarrassment about that day I met Michael Sheard, because I was in a bit of a vulnerable place and I drank too much, and I was probably a bit of an idiot. And but the fact is, probably most people had forgotten about that within a couple of weeks, but it still looms large to me 20 odd years later, because the things that shame us, the things that make us go scarlet, or the things that niggle us, we give those far more life, that I think, sometimes, than we do our happy memories. And so that's why it's nice that Doctor Who, which usually has happy associations, whether it be friendships, encounters, excitements, or whatever, or just even safety amongst a bad time, it is such an important exercise for us. Because yes, I do feel that as you get older, you just become an accumulation of regrets and embarrassments, and that's why old people are sort of grumpy. So it takes an effort of the will, I think, to try and plug in and tune into the positive, which is what all this is about. Because I do sometimes worry about being sort of cloying, and I don't intend to be. I'm very much a glass half empty sort of person, but I feel it's my own responsibility to try and fill it. So I'm glad that this story has prompted memories of your of your friend, Stephen, and I'm raising my cup of tea to the memory of Amanda, who I didn't know, but will have been in the same room as that day. And probably annoyed. Lisa and Andrew. Michael Sheard was a lovely man. We shared a few good times with him at conventions and when we visited the Isle of Wight where he lived. He once embarrassed us in a pub when he loudly asked if we were living in sin. We were and still are. Good for you, Lisa and Andrew. I can't think of two nicer sinners. And I'm glad Michael Sheard embarrassed you because, as we've already discovered, I probably embarrassed myself in front of Michael Sheard. So let's spread the embarrassment as thinly as we can, and then it can't harm any of us. David Gillespie Pratt. It doesn't look as polished. Oh, he's talking about The Invisible Enemy, not Michael Sheard or any embarrassing encounters with me. Thank goodness. It doesn't look as polished as Space 1999, but it's by far better written and more fun. And I like Space 1999, unlike my other half, who swears at it. I can't think of many consecutive stories that are so different on almost every level than this and Horror of Fang Rock. Brilliant, but in different ways. Well, Horror of Fang Rock is a 10 out of 10 for me, David. I'm not sure Invisible Enemy is up there, but as you may have gathered, it's a story I find difficult to score objectively. But certainly in terms of what it does for me as an adventure, I do find it somewhat frayed around the edges. Let's see what I make of it this time, though. Robbie Carnegie says, I was 12 when this went out, and I remember enjoying it very much at the time. I like the fact that Baker and Martin never felt constrained by the limitations of what was possible in the limited technology and budget they have, even if it doesn't always work out. I was and remain totally smitten by Leela, and Louise Jameson is terrific in this as ever. Oh, and to me, Brian Grelis will always be the man who steals Tom Good's leaks in The Good Life. Of course he is. Ha ha ha. Yes, what a fantastic role that is, and an important part of a very funny episode of a landmark sitcom. That's the beautiful thing of an actor's life. You know, you can sort of plod along doing bits and bobs, but one part you play. You'd be one of many actors in The Good Life, for example, but that guest turn is one that a lot of people remember because of that particular episode. Lovely. Alex Kafajoglu says, Michael Sheard turned on our Christmas lights in Sheringham in 1998. As I recall, he didn't accept a fee. Sounds like him, but asked for a donation to be made to charity and the opportunity to sell his book. So they set him up in the foyer of the local theatre and everyone queued up to meet him afterwards. He was a lovely chap. I got his book and an Empire Strikes Back still signed. I told him he was probably the actor I'd seen most in different films and programmes, and that he always seemed to be on TV. And he said, well, I'm on now. And he was. Escape to Athena was on BBC One that afternoon. And yes, when I see Brian Grelis, the first role I think of is the man Tom Good shoots in the bottom for stealing his leaks in The Good Life. A classic episode. Always nice seeing familiar figures crop up in old Doctor Who. It's all I do now, Alex, is I watch old telly and pat myself on the back for spotting who people are. I was watching a Family at War the other day, and going, that's Bill Lyons, who's Janosch the Guard in episode 3 of Enemy of the World. Prunella Ransom, stunning Prunella, freckled Prunella Ransom, who was the wife of Trevor Ray, his sister. Anyway, I'm sure we'll get to that when we get to Doctor Who and the Silurians. Paul Dunn says, this is one of those stories I like much more when I watch it than I think I do in Prospect, if that makes sense. Absolutely. There's a few TV programmes like that for me, Paul. I love Inside Number 9, but I always have to sort of take a run up to it. I don't know why. And then I always go, why do I have to take a run up to that? It's amazing. But I sort of convince myself I might not be in the mood. I think this is the start of Tom's silly phase. I think you might be right, Paul. Jokes are creeping in, although not overwhelming at this point. The model work is mostly superb, but the sets all seem to have that Graham Williams thing of looking a bit cheap. Some of the CSO in the Doctor's brain actually looks really good. We've got that to come, Paul. Overall, good fun with another great performance from the mighty Michael Sheard. A lot of Sheard love today. Anthony Carroll, I was starting to watch Who at this time as a kid. Only very vague memories, like episode 1. Builds up nicely. Love Shivery Low. Best episode of the 4. I think you're right, Anthony. I think episode 1 might be the best episode of the 4. We're about to see, because we're about to watch episode 2. Shane plays, I love the term beige sci-fi, of which Space... Did I say that, Shane? Oh, I must have been having a good moment. Of which Space 99 and Star Trek The Motion Picture are the peak examples for me. If I didn't say beige sci-fi and I was cropped up somewhere else, I apologise for taking credit for it, but if it was me, I'm happy. For this episode of Who, one of the things I liked the best was, as your guest Iain Key pointed out in his favourite things, the phonetic spellings on many of the signs. For example, emergency exit and isolation ward. Yes, I didn't comment on those. They're throughout the story, aren't they? But it's a good nod to the future, which is a nice nod that English continues to change over time, and we are in the future. In my opinion, an advanced bit of world-building nuance for this era of BBC sci-fi. A small bit of research reveals that the script referred to it as Finglish. Also, big nod to one of my favourite companions, Leela, in this episode. Much more chops and dimension than one would expect from a, in inverted commas, savage. Plus, love her wearing his hat. I love her wearing his hat as well. Yes, I didn't talk about the phonetic spelling. I think because I associate it, I think, more with the later episodes, maybe. I don't know. But yes, it's definitely a good nod. I'm sure I saw somebody on Twitter recently saying they've spelt that wrong and cottoning on a bit later, which is one of those things that, you know, one should just let go. It's just somebody being a bit dim or making a mistake, but because it's written down, you sort of go, I need to address that. I didn't, but it's still niggle. It's like when I saw somebody was watching Quatermass and the Pit for the first time, and they did a still, said, God, it's only a minute in and there's already a mistake because Hobbs Lane is spelt in 2 different ways. It's like, do you not maybe think that people in 1958 could see, and that we're so tuned to go, shall I spot a mistake in this thing, rather than these intelligent people who made a landmark piece of television might have done this deliberately. The idea that our default is always to go, they got that wrong, infuriates me, which is why I've just mentioned that has nothing to do with this. I do bear a grudge. Jason Thompson. Whereas, of course, if I made a mistake on Twitter and somebody needled me for it, I would be really irritated to go, can a bloke not just put a thing up? It was just an idle thought. Although they had done a screen grab, so it wasn't that idle. Anyway, Jason Thompson says, my favourite thing about this episode was when I learned, having seen the gorgeous images of the Titan spaceport with Saturn hanging in the sky in the background, that a tennis ball was used for Saturn. The seam pattern was perfect for the cloud belts. I think that perfectly sums up Doctor Who, making the extraordinary from something so mundane. Saturn, incidentally, seen from Titan, would appear about 11 times larger than our moon appears to us, with the rings even wider. But you wouldn't be able to see it, thanks to Titan's thick, soupy atmosphere. We will let them off this detail, though, because we didn't know that until a few years later, when Pioneer 11 flew by in 1979. Well, I didn't know that till right just now, Jason, so I forgave them for even longer. This is very Arethian all of a sudden. Thanks, Jason. Jason, remember, is one of the few people to have been defeated by me in Happy Times and Places, and if that galvanizes him to give us some proper science every time, I am more than delighted. Gareth Bowley says, the target book for this holds a place in my heart as it started me on my reading journey that remains today. Well, Gareth, it was your first book, my first TV episode, and Iain Key's choice for Happy Times and Places. Iain has a book out, and so that's why I've decided to schedule this one for this time. Although also we are counting down to 100 stories covered in Happy Times and Places. So in the vague sort of atmosphere lurking in the landscape as we approach 100, it seems nice to add some stories that are landmarks for various different reasons themselves, but not perhaps enough to give them the 100 status. It would have been very self-indulgent, wouldn't it, if I'd said, well, The Invisible Enemy will be story 100 because it's my first story. So instead I've made it number, whatever this is, 90-something. So Iain Key has chosen episode... he's chosen the whole of The Invisible Enemy, but our viewing marathon has got us to episode 2, and I would like you, if you are so inclined, and this is how you do it, to press play in 3, 2, 1. So, yes, it is a slightly different feeling, this episode, isn't it? Because we go to the Titan base. I do quite like it sometimes when an episode 1 is a bit of an establisher, and then the rest of the story takes a slightly different turn, because it gives the episode 1s their own feel. And and there are some stories where that's it means we don't meet any of the characters, like Ark in Space One. I do sometimes struggle with those because I want to meet new people. But sometimes we get a place or an incident, and then the story goes in its actual proper direction. But I did enjoy episode 1, but we don't really need to spend too much more time here. A lot of love for Michael Sheard and for Brian Grillis. Brian Grillis knew Derek Goodwin. They founded a theatre company together in the 60s, I think, with Ken Loach and Jill Gascoigne as well. So Brian Grillis was old mates with the director, and that often helps you to get a job. But he was qualified for the job because he was a well-known character actor too. But there's more than just a professional connection, I would say, with Brian Grillis and Derek Goodwin. I think they went back a long way. I do remember all this hair. That's rather good hair, isn't it? Hair's not necessarily always easy to do. There's a lot of flappy beards in 70s Doctor Who, but I think that it's not so sort of tough as to look like wire. You don't want hair that looks like wire, but it's not so flappy that it looks like sort of cotton. I think it's good. I think the excellent hair. Everything was a lot hairier in the 1970s, and I'm not sure I approve of all the. Anyway, let's not get into that. But all this tweezering and waxing and everything that people. I mean, as a bald man, I envy the mop. Currently atop Tom Baker's head, although I wouldn't carry off hair that long. Mine tends to grow in unflattering directions, and is very, very. I mean, there's nothing really left on top anymore. Anyway, let's not talk about it. Brian Grillis has got more hair on his eyebrows here than I have on my head. But here is a bald, one of the kings of the bald people, Michael Sheard. I do, as I mentioned, sort of do like. Part of the joy of just watching old programs is being able to. So you're sort of giving yourself a pat on the back. So I'm not sure I approve of it. Part of the joy of watching an old episode of Z-Cars is being able to go, oh, I know who that is. What? That is no use to anybody. The only use is to show off to somebody who themselves might already know that information anyway, and you've just spotted the person 5 seconds quicker. I like how the nucleus is rather cunning here. That they do this kind of backstory to convince Leela that Lo is a friend of hers, B, that the problem here has been overcome, that Safran has been executed by Lo, but Lo has been injured himself. I mean, it's sometimes sort of nebulous aliens can make its human hosts. I've been writing about Quatermass recently, and Quatermass 2 bears some similarities with this. And one of the issues with Quatermass 2, I think, is that the aliens take people over and they have to talk like they've been taken over. And that doesn't sustain wider storytelling. You go, well, so the aliens have taken over people in order to disguise themselves as those people, but when they get home they go, hello dear, is supper ready? Whereas I rather like that Lo, the nucleus has enabled Lo to be a little bit cunning, which makes obviously for a much more threatening nemesis, really, because something that is zombie-like, yes, the taking away of the humanity is helpful, because anything that sort of sublimates what we understand of our of our personalities or whatever can be scary because of the removal of the humanity. I get that, but it does mean it compromises elsewhere. It must be a difficulty for the makers of science fiction to go, how alien do we have our takeover appear? Now, this is Nell Curran, who is even closer to the director than Brian Grillis, because she is his wife. Nell Curran. And another lingering resentment that I have is that when Elizabeth, who died this year, who plays Marius's nurse, Doctor Who magazine used a picture of Nell Curran, who is not Marius's nurse. She is Nurse. It is a different character. I expect everybody to know that, but I expect Doctor Who magazine to get that right, especially when they're running pictures of somebody who has just died. And it's things like that dingle me. Although I'm sure I have made mistakes like that myself, because this is my ballpark, I guess. But I think you should know that there's if you're producing work on so this is the lady who died this year, Marius, his nurse, not this year, last year. It's a different character. They fulfill different functions just because they're both called Nurse. It doesn't. Yeah, they're different characters. They fulfill different functions. Anyway, we also have. Even now, having said it, I feel like an idiot for saying it because it's something that sort of festers in your subconscious, and then when you say it out loud, you realise it's breathtakingly unimportant. There's an important point to make there. Actually, talking about before, as I was about, getting old and things, resentments and memories festering to make you unhappy. I'll get serious for a second. I go to AA meetings, and what one of the things that you do there is that you talk about things that have bothered you and how you coped, how you dealt with them, because in the old days you'd have dealt with them by getting pissed. And quite often you go there with something that you've built up as being something that's really annoyed you, and then you say it out loud. And it takes its power away, and you go, actually enunciated, it sounds rubbish. It does. It sounds really weak, considering the power I've given it in my head, if you like. So there is something to be said for saying stuff out loud, which is, of course, what Twitter is, which is, of course, what discourse is, what broadcasting is. So actually, sometimes when people are saying things out there, sometimes saying things at us that might cause us our own resentments, all they are doing is getting stuff out there. It's a sort of cathartic process. Although I would say, your catharsis should not be directed directly at anybody in a way that can upset them. But anyway, there was I got slightly distracted there, giving you a lecture about the power of saying things out loud and how annoying sort of niggling little irritations can be. All prompted by a niggling little irritation of mine that Nell Curran, who plays the nurse that signs them in to the Bayal Foundation, is different to Marius's nurse, who's the actress in this scene, who doesn't actually get many close-ups. I think Nell Curran actually gets more, and her contribution to the series is over. But Derek Godwin was an interesting director in the sense that he didn't direct any other Doctor Who's, but he worked at the Royal Court Theatre. He had quite a theatre pedigree, but then did loads of sitcoms on ITV. So he's unlike really any other Doctor Who TV director in that his pedigree is slightly different, and his career sort of went in different directions, and he didn't work on Doctor Who long enough to establish a style. This is his only one. Now here we have the mighty Frederick Jaeger. I wrote Frederick Jaeger's obituary for The Guardian. It was one of the earliest ones I did. In fact, I wrote Frederick Jaeger and Michael Sheard's obituaries for The Guardian. He has recently, not that long ago, been in Planet of Evil. It seems Doctor Who's cherry-picking its actors from earlier in Tom Baker's era, because you've got Frederick Jaeger here, Brian Grelis was in Revenge of the Cybermen, Michael Sheard was in Pyramids of Mars, and Roy Herrick playing Parsons, who looks so young there. He's been in Doctor Who as far back as The Reign of Terror, when he must have been a fetus, because he's a very young-looking actor. He's excellent in Survivors. But he was also the voice of Zoanon in The Face of Evil. And here we have Jim McManus, who as he got older, got a bit jowlier. When he died, somebody very kindly fed back that they enjoyed my description of him as an actor who looks like a retired Dracula. And Jim McManus, shortly after this, appeared in Shakespeare at the Ludlow Festival, playing in... I don't think it was Midsummer. I did see him in A Midsummer Night's Dream, playing, I think I think Snuggle, was it Starveling? Playing one of the rude mechanicals in Midsummer Night's Dream, directed by Peter Krigine, who was partially, possibly responsible for cancelling or at least not letting Doctor Who back onto the air. But he was a fine director of Shakespeare, and he directed A Midsummer Night's Dream that Jim McManus was in. But Jim McManus had been in at the Ludlow Festival prior to that in another production, maybe Richard II or something, shortly after this, because in his that clip's used in is it Resistance is Useless? One of it was the first time I'd seen it in really good quality since it was broadcast. Anyway, so yes, Jim McManus in his programme notes put, Jim has just fulfilled a lifelong ambition by appearing in 3 episodes of Doctor Who. So it wasn't just here's Jim's list of credits. It's Jim. Jim really wants to point out that he's been in Doctor Who, and he was a great character actor. Jim McManus. He did a lot of the sort of undercover Beatles about sort of sketches, that sort of thing. And I saw him play Mr. Paravicini in The Mousetrap at London's West End about a decade ago. But he is now no longer with us. He died last year or the year before. So all these characters that you sort of took for granted still working, he cropped up in Doctors and all sorts of things, Jim McManus, then take their final bow and go to the great green room in the sky, often unnoticed, which is why I make no apology for gassing on about them here, because they will always linger on our television screens so long as we watch programmes like this, and we can have fun spotting them. So yes, Roy Herrick is also sadly no longer with us. He died very young. I've discovered he was one of the many victims of AIDS, sadly. So he was a friend of Pennant Roberts. He's in fact he's in Survivors with Brian Grellis. Because it's the one with Patrick Trout. They're in the one with Patrick Trout, and he's in the one with Patrick Trout and Kevin McNally and Brian Grellis. Now, this is an interesting pair because it's Roderick Smith, who's the younger one, became a regular in Dangerfield, but was actually in David Tennant's Hamlet with the Royal Shakespeare Company. So he's had a sort of long career being on, I think he was a sort of semi-regular in Dangerfield, which was a long-running show, but has sort of muddled along in the acting profession without anybody probably paying too much attention, and yet has managed to crop up doing things and have a good career and keep going. But I've never heard anybody talk of Roderick Smith. In fact, I don't even know that he's done a signing. And yet he was working as recently enough to be in David Tennant's Hamlet. And the other one is Kenneth Waller, who nobody talks about, was really famous for a bit. He was Grandad in Bread, which was a massive sitcom. And he was a brilliant part because people would just knock on his door and he'd tell them to go away in a rude way. But he was a grumpy old sod and a brilliant character. And I don't think either Roderick Smith or Kenneth Waller actually get so much as a close-up in this. So they're pretty thankless tasks. But it just goes to show that the further you delve down the cast list, the more you can continue to have fun. But they don't quite have as much fun as Michael Sheard, in the sense that they do have to do slightly alien taken over acting, and it's as I say, it's a tricky line to draw in terms of where you go with it, because it can be comical, it can be boring if people are simply sort of automata. I remember this voice of John Leeson's as the nucleus, particularly from next week's episode. There we have that. What? Oh, there's Nell Curran again. So she's not finished quite yet, but she still doesn't do as much as Marius's nurse, who's in lots and lots of scenes. That we've just had a repeated shot. I was slightly confused because we just had a repeated shot of the shuttle, and I was thinking, why are they showing that? Because I've sort of forgotten some of the details of the story, because this is not one that I watch very often. that's quite good Star Trekky stuff of the actors have to throw themselves around the set. That the camera wobbles and Tom Baker falls off the bed. That was rather nice. Leela's taking this very much in her stride, but yes, so the shuttle is a repeated shot from episode 1, which I suppose if you're watching on a weekly basis doesn't actually matter too much, but it confused me momentarily, and I remember all of this sort of clinical white stuff and the bald man with the gun walking around, and I. Yes, and so we also have, which I haven't really talked about, bar in the comments. Yes, the attempts to show the future through emergency exit and the phonetic spelling of the signs, which is rather good. I mean, I like it because it's imaginative, but I also resist it because I don't think bad spelling should be rewarded by longevity. Do you know what I mean? If people make a mistake, because I know, for example, Appletize is now called Appletizer because too many people called it Appletizer. Don't reward people for errors. Spellings change over time because people change the spelling of things. Cheryl E always says H, and I say it's H. But you hear so many people saying H now, it will soon probably become official that it's H. That to me is rewarding people getting things wrong, and I don't approve of that. I think people should be corrected, and I don't actually think you should be allowed on the BBC if you say H, because it's incorrect. But what will happen is in 200 years' time, things like that will become common, the way of doing it, and it will become the official way of doing it, and some of the way that we spell and say things will become archaic. I love a laser gun fight in Doctor Who. There aren't nearly enough of them, but I think these ones are quite hard, and I actually quite like the way that we got straight into the action there. That we didn't see them getting out of the wall cupboard, the lift that they'd gone down in. It was just straight into the sort of gunfight, which I think was fun. Hang on, I haven't even mentioned K9. This is how for granted I take K9, and yet my first story was his debut. So K9 was new. Again, I don't really have an opinion on K9. I've never minded him. I know some people hate him. I've never, but even oddly because he's in my first story. But I've also never been wild about him. I think he's quite fun. I think you can have some good jokes. I think there's also a lot of bad jokes. Excellent role there, Leela. I love that. She could be in The Professionals. But yes, how do I feel about Kenner? Because as I say, I know some people who really hate him. I think he's rather fun. I think John Leeson is brilliant and also a lovely, lovely person. And I was overjoyed, more overjoyed than I thought I would be when he returned in School Reunion. I mean, that's the problem with him, isn't he? Is that somebody had to approach him and get really close and then get killed by being shot in the knee. So is that the end of... I think that's the end of Kenneth Waller, maybe. You can see the hand back to him. So it's not very rewarding for some of the actors, even though their names do intrigue them to us. Can you intrigue somebody too? You know you can't. Yeah, I think some of the supporting characters in this get pretty short shrift, and no close-ups. I think a sympathetic director at least gives. I always feel if you can't get a screen grab on which to get a signed photograph of an actor, they've been given short shrift. And when I'm doing the in memoriam videos, if there aren't any studio photos of them, I have to get a screen grab, and it's tricky for some of these performers. I know I had real trouble actually with so Elizabeth Norman is the actress that plays Marius's nurse, who'd sort of been acting in amateur dramatics, and in fact somebody I know communicated with me and said, I knew her for years, and I knew she used to be a professional actor, but we'd never got round to talking about Doctor Who. And then she died, and he discovered who she was. And I was like, oh, you should have. Maybe she told him she'd been in Doctor Who, but they hadn't actually got down to the nitty gritty of it. But yeah, he never spoke to her, and she died. Was it last year or the year before? It was again recently. But I actually struggled to get a screen grab of her face, and she's in 3 episodes. So we have the clone thing now. Baker and Martin are interesting, aren't they? And I'm sure we'll talk about K9 later. I don't know what I think of K9. I think it's a great design. Whereas what I do know what I think is that this is Pat Gorman, and I like the fact he's credited not as medic, that's the part he plays, but a medic, which to me is beautifully old-fashioned, because that's what you get in Shakespeare. You get a scrivener, or whatever. If you don't know the name of somebody, and we don't get many us in Doctor Who. Bernard Horsfall is a stranger in The Mind Robber, and Pat Gorman is a medic. I think I like that, because it actually, I mean, I think originally it gives you the feeling of being almost more anonymous. I'm not even the medic, I'm a medic, but actually it gives it an oldie worldy charm and detachment that I rather like. So I think this is an excellent makeup on Tom Baker. I think, the colour of monsters is usually green. The colour of hair is usually dark. So I think the white is quite alarming and disconcerting. Yeah, obviously. I remember this. I remember the bald man talking to them via the television set. So I mean, these are my earliest memories of Doctor Who. So it must have been doing something right, and I think it's rather exciting. Anything that's got a sort of siege process going on and laser guns and all of that. Although the execution of it is obviously a bit claggy for today. It was good stuff, and I like the way that that set is working, with the bit of equipment in the ceiling, and the angle from which that's shot. It just feels like we're in a proper building. The clinical whiteness is a curious one, isn't it? Because they have this with Ark in Space as well, and you're going for a gleaming, clean, white sort of clinical backdrop, which is plausible and sensible. But I'm not sure it sometimes helps with atmosphere, or maybe I just associate atmosphere and grown-up drama and stuff like that with rust and with darkness. But there's no reason it shouldn't be like this. But I don't think it always contributes to making the visuals as compelling as they might, even though actually juxtaposed with clean whiteness, sort of viscous alien goo can seem like an aberration or an infection. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot I don't know about this. I'm thinking on my feet. I remember this. And I think there's a photo, isn't there, of the two of them in the window. I love Leela's reaction to anything sort of sciencey. I love Louise pulling her face that she's not particularly impressed. She invests so much. I'm pretty sure I remember this as well, and I definitely remember the sort of plug hole bit that we're about to see. That I think is the end of the episode. So yeah, the cloney thing. So I started talking about Bob Baker and Dave Martin and got waylaid by cast lists and resentments. Cast lists and resentments. That's what my autobiography should be called. Cast lists and resentments. I mean, that's sort of a bit prosaic, isn't it? We have all this sort of cloning technology and all this amazing outer space stuff. And then he has to suck them up through a syringe, where you sort of, I would want maybe some liquid in there or something like that. I don't know. It just feels a little bit sort of cheap. That I would like maybe a nod to the logic of how that works, rather than, and also you don't inject air into somebody. Is that supposed to be liquid? I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It just I think they could have been a bit more artful in the way that they did that. But I do like the image of the Doctor and Leela shooting into the brain, because again, this is the story saying, and now we're going somewhere else. So we had an episode 1 that was like that. Now we have an episode 2 we're in the Baal Foundation, but now episode 3 we're going into the Doctor's brain, so it keeps the story moving. It changes the the backdrop for each episode. So, and that's maybe why I don't have an angle on the story, in the sense that it doesn't have one vibe, if you like. Episode 1 and episode 2 and episode 3 all have a slightly different sort of feeling. It's almost like lots of different adventures or lots of different textures, which is not a criticism, but it means I sometimes struggle, I think, to have an angle on Invisible Enemy. But that's also because the director hasn't directed much Doctor Who. That's also because it's my first story, but that's also because it's not a story I watch an awful lot. And I think my overarching feeling about it is that it's a bit tatty, and and I'm always about the characters, and I do think Derek Goodwin has sold some of his supporting cast a bit short, who you don't actually get to see their faces, which I think is a bit of a shame. And I think you always get the best out of actors if you can see what they're doing. But yeah, so no major criticisms, and in fact, some of the things that perhaps keep me at a distance from it, or stop me from having too much of an angle on it, is partially to do with my own sort of concerns and my own particular journey to and from this story. But what do I like about this? Well, I like anything with a laser gun siege. I like the makeup. I love the hairy makeup and the hairy the whiteness on the faces. It's the debut of K9, and K9 is great. And K9 has sort of always been part of Doctor Who for me. I was too young to sort of take in that this was his first story, and he was being introduced. Everything was just kind of there. I was, bear in mind, I was 4. So I didn't really have K9 being new in that sense, because this is all Doctor Who was new when I first watched this, and I don't have firm enough memories to be able to chart my journey in that way. I have snatched images here and there. So K9 has always been sort of part of Doctor Who to me. So I can understand people who are a bit older than me feeling that he was an imposition on the show that did change the dynamic and its approach to humour and its influences. It's obviously got an eye on cute robots from American sci-fi, and what we love about Doctor Who is that it's very British, but actually the Doctor's relationship with K9 is, I think, very much part of the show's sensibility of Tom Baker being grumpy and K9 being charming and all those things. So I think it's a bit like the Doctor's relationship with Zoe, in the sense that the Doctor gets impatient and furious with logic, because he wants there to be more to the world than logic. But of course, logic and correct information are often right, and sometimes we get furious when we hear things are right, because we don't want things to be right. Because that can be annoying. So I actually love just talking about the Doctor's relationship with K9 now. I'm getting very excited about K9, and I wonder if I should choose K9, even though I barely spoke about K9 in the episode. But I will say this a lot. Bear in mind, I have to react to what I see, and sometimes I'm talking about something really trivial when something major happens, and that's the nature of spontaneous conversation. But yes, K9 is a vital part of this, and K9 is a much loved part of Doctor Who has prospered, who's had his own spin-off even in an Australian series where he didn't look anything like K9, and what a strange beast that was. But again, just the very fact that it exists, the art lies in the fact that that there's this Australian series set in London that happened whilst Doctor Who was back on the telly, because I bet if that had happened anytime between 1989 and 2005, we'd have been feasting on whatever it's called. K9 Goes to Australia. K9 Goes to Cockney Australia. But so what a bizarre... So that means he's not in the new series as much as he should be, but then sometimes he is, and he's in a cupboard doing something to space for Sarah Jane Smith. But he does then get the odd moment where he can come and shine when he visits both the Sarah Jane Adventures and Doctor Who. And I love School Reunion. In fact, I have School Reunion scheduled to be next in Happy Times and Places. I haven't deliberately placed them like that. School Reunion is there for other reasons that it's important to me, but I think it's rather fun now as I realise this in real time. See, this is why I do it like this, for moments like... It's not that good a moment, Toby. But anyway, I've just noticed that, yes, the one I have planned is sort of K9's last adventure, although he then it's not, but it kind of is for that purpose. Well, K9's return to Doctor Who in its new. Well, whatever bookends you want the Invisible Enemy and School Reunion to be, they are next to each other. There's no books betwixt them in happy times and places. I love Michael Sheard. I mean, I love the fact that I have these little memories poking out. It's good to see Frederick Jaeger, who's everyone, because he's so serious and very good in Planet of Evil. People sort of say, "Oh, and he's doing a silly accent in this." He is kind of doing a silly accent in this, but I think it's fine. He's not undermining the drama. He is playing a type. He's deliberately playing a type. But types can still have true emotions, and types can still give us proper drama. It just reminds us of the sort of slightly heightened nature of everything, which can be useful because it actually then helps us to accept the actual crazy stuff, and realize that everything in this exists in a slightly heightened version of our reality, but that doesn't mean that the jeopardy and the characters aren't real. So I think it's good to see Frederick Jaeger. It's good to see a lot of those actors. Lovely to see Jim McManus. Lovely to see some of these actors who deserved better from Doctor Who, but then again, if they hadn't been in this, they wouldn't have been in Doctor Who at all, and we wouldn't be able to say Grandad from Bread was in Doctor Who. But I'm intrigued by Roderick Smith now, because I've seen him on stage in Hamlet, while recent Doctor Who was on. But I don't know if he's working now, and he will obviously be quite old now. But he was still working. I say not very long ago. It's probably now a decade, isn't it? But that's not very long to me. It's a long time to have stopped acting though. But I wonder if David Tennant quizzed him about the Invisible Enemy when they were doing Hamlet. I bloody well hope so. I do really hope so. But I'm surprised he's not been, because he's been so visible. Why has he not done a signing? Anybody out there, have you ever met Roderick Smith? He's obviously, he's going to be quite hard to find as well, because Smith is he might not be actually. But anyway, I don't know of any interviews or even autographs involving Roderick Smith from the Invisible Enemy. Perhaps I've still got to contact Proctor Neiman from The Keeper of Traken. I've got too many actors to contact. Too much contact has been made. But what do I like about the Invisible Enemy Part 2? It's going to have to be K9, isn't it? Because I have to play this slightly strategically. K9 is a vital part of Doctor Who. The fact that he joined the TARDIS did take the show in a slightly different direction, and that wasn't always the plan as well. It's always fun to note things that were supposed to be much more trivial entries to Doctor Who's canon, or certainly much less long-lasting, that then become something hugely associated with it. And the story of K9 is that he was designed for one story and ended up being an icon of the show. So I, of course, am going to choose Iain Key. I'm going to choose K9. John Leeson does the voice absolutely spot on, and I know that Roy Spencer from Fury from the Deep, Harris, and he's Maniac in the Ark, I think was seen and did a bit of a reading for the voice, and I can see why, because he's got lovely, beautiful, clear diction, and I can see him having been a good K9. But John Leeson has lovely character. That I think is and we know the stories of Tom Baker saying about Leeson turning up to rehearsals, which he didn't need to do, but in order to make everything just work better. And I think that does really affect the Doctor and K9's relationship. And I do like that. I do like that relationship that they have. So John Leeson deserves a lot of credit for that. But Tony Harding's design is superb. I think it is yes, practically we do have issues, particularly with the shootings, but I loved them as a kid, but looking at them now, it's a bit of a the poor guy has to stand there and do nothing and then be told, to die by death by knee shot. But anyway, K9. Am I in good company with my love of K9? Let's see what Iain Key has to say is his thing for episode 2.
Hi Toby. So episode 2. Space Hospital, complete switch of scene from the first episode. There's that phrase, contact has been made, which really sparked the imagination. I think I could probably imagine myself playing Doctor Who in the playground after that episode was shown. It looks so cheap in so many ways, but there's so many big ideas in the story, and they're bold and they really go for it. I love the way that they clone the Doctor and Leela and inject them into the Doctor's body, and obviously we see K9 for the first time. If I was going to go for something though for the favourite point of the episode, it would be contact has been made.
Contact has been made. Well, of course, I've been thinking about that. Sorry, plug alert. I'm already in trouble on my Patreon for mentioning Quatermass too often. Sorry, everybody. But contact has been made is, of course, an echo of contact has been established. The first episode title of anything Quatermass, the title to episode 1 of the Quatermass experiment, about which I have a book coming out imminently as I record this. In fact, it was sent to the printers yesterday. Oh, good Lord. Contact has been made with the printers. So it is a phrase that echoes for me and that makes me smile, and especially the fact that it links Doctor Who to Quatermass, even though it's not exact. But I didn't choose it. No, I chose K9. Perhaps Iain will choose K9 as his overall thing, which means I still get a point because I chose it first. But of course, it means I lose out on the potential of another point because what I choose for the overall thing won't be the same as his. But so there's still a chance for me to claw a point back. But we're 1-1, and I wonder if I might have chosen contact has been made at some point, because it is quite a nice catchphrase for all those reasons I've explained. Couple of things I forgot to mention. I do like the when I was gassing on about Derek Goodwin's wife being this, I do like the display on the monitor of the Doctor's face and his profile. That's a bit of effort gone into that to make it a sort of spacey computer profile, which I rather like. It's things like that think, how might they do this in the future? What's something that we can look at that we can sort of recognise as being a practical thing, but also has an element of futuristic thought about it. I enjoy that. But then there's the fact that the first time we see the Baal Foundation, it's that the model has already got the damage by the shuttle crash, which doesn't happen till later, and that's one of those things where the production is slightly tattier than it needs to be. It's sort of gently leading us into the Williams era, where sometimes you can see the gaffer tape or the floorboards, which doesn't do it any favors in some sense. I know some people like the sort of slightly gang show element to it, but I prefer anything that's there that can help us to suspend our disbelief is probably better, even though we as Doctor Who fans are trained that none of that really matters so long as there's a sense of fun and adventure. But I think I reject the idea that the sort of worse the production values are, the more we like the show. I think that's Tommy rot. I prefer now. I don't mind a compromised production value, but I prefer it when everyone's going the extra mile or making the extra effort or working to that higher skill level. And it's a shame because some of the model design is excellent. Although there is a production mistake of a similar kind that isn't one that is famous in a subsequent episode that I'm sure I will talk about then, unless I'm dragging up some minor resentment or getting pernickety about some minor detail of cast listing or somebody perfectly innocently having the audacity to get something slightly wrong on Twitter. Oh, I'm ghastly. I need somebody to send a clone into my brain and to go and clean up all the malignancy within. And so bearing that in mind, but they better use liquid while they're doing it, and not a syringe, but something more modern. But while all of that happens, I'm going to go for a detox and wish you all the best, and that where you are is a very happy time and a very happy place. Thanks to Iain Key, who has a book out right now, People's History of the Clash, with a foreword by Billy Bragg. I'll let him talk about that in subsequent episodes. I'm sure he's already mentioned it in his introduction, but I can't remember because that was 50 minutes ago. But yeah, follow Iain and avail yourself of his work. And he's working on another book as well, which I think is in decent taste. I'm not writing another thing for at least... Oh, no, hang on. I've got that and I've got that. All right. Off. I'm off. Contact has been ceased. Thank you for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Iain Key, who you can find on Twitter at Iain Key. But remember, it's the Ian with 2 I's, at IAINKEY. Iain has a new book out. Do avail yourself of it. I'm grateful to Iain and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Colin Kilpatrick, Matthew Kilburn, James Kersey, Peter Kelly, William Keith, Judith Jackson, Robert Jewell, Ed Jefferson, Steve Herr, Tom Hunter-Watts, Neil Humphreys, Darren Howard, Matthew Hooliston, Sam Hollingsworth, Andrew Hodgson, Simon Hodges, Stephen Hill, Matthew Herbert, Paul Hayes, Ronald Hayden, Duncan Harvey, Michael Harvey, Richard Harris, Matthew Harris, Steve Hatcher, John Hancock, William Hames, Aaron Gullias, Angus Gulliver, Paul J. Guest, Paul Greaves, Graham, James Gould, and Lisa Gledhill. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like to become a patron, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where for as little as £3 a month you get advance releases. The podcasts are always available there first. You also get exclusive releases, including a monthly AMAs, Ask Me Anythings. There's sometimes more than one a month. And you also get exclusive behind-the-scenes looks at some of the Blu-ray and DVD extras that I do, and other bits and bobs. And yes, sometimes quite a heavy dose of Quatermass, especially when I'm preparing to get a book out. I'm sorry about that. But it's my space, and I'll put out the stuff that I hope people come to it for, including sometimes comedy from my comedy club as well, because I am a working stand-up comedian. It's not all just arcane cast list facts. Sometimes I try to be amusing, and sometimes I succeed. And all of that is available. There's usually 3 releases a week as well. I try and get stuff out there, but they're sometimes long. I mean, there's a 5-hour podcast currently there for the 20th anniversary of New Doctor Who that has the shortened version has been out to everybody else, and that's got Russell T Davies on it. The longer version has a couple of other illustrious contributors to Series 1 of New Doctor Who, as well as some of the very first contributors to this Happy Times and Places podcast. And that, as I say, is a 5-hour long broadcast. The version available to everybody else out there at the moment, as I record this, is only an hour long. So yeah, plenty more where that came from, as well as all sorts of other things. That's at patreon.com/Toby Haydock, and you also get your name read out on the credits. You can support me in other ways. You can go to ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock and put a few quid in the pot whenever you fancy, but without any monthly commitment. And you can also support without any financial outlay at all by going to Apple, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and give these 5 stars and some positive reviews and some nice comments. I'm all over social media. You can follow me on Twitter. You can see me on Facebook, and I do Instagram as well. Not TikTok yet, though. Not TikTok. I don't know if you can hear noises in the background. Shirley's back, so I am going to finish now, and the post-credits coda, which is usually something boring anyway, is instead now the intrusion of real life, and sometimes we all need a bit of that. But so if you heard any background noise, apologies for that. It's because I live in a house with a person, and sometimes that's going to happen. Sorry.